Hello, everyone. This is Comic Uno, and I am here with Pat Shand for a very cool interview, which is actually for school. But I said, why not put on Comic Uno? That way you guys can enjoy it also. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. It's going to be a lot of fun. And my first question is, how did you get into the comic book industry, Pat?
All right. Well, huh. I started reading comics around 2007. I had read a few before that. As a kid, I had a box of comics that I would kind of read and go back to. But for the most part, after that, I started reading novels, like Goosebumps books and Fear Street and all that R.L. Stein stuff. But then once I got a little bit older, I got into TV shows, and I found out that there are comic book continuations, so I started reading those. And then I made friends with the editors and the artists, and I started going to Comic Cons, and I got the chance to pitch for Angel at IDW, and my pitch went through, got a short story there, and then from that point on, I started getting other gigs. I wanted to use that first job as a stepping stone. So yeah, I started working with companies like IDW, Big Dog Inc., Titan, and finally Zenescope, who reached out to me and wanted me to do a kind of exclusive deal. So since then, I've been working with them as well as some other side companies, because they let me do pretty much. If someone comes to me and approaches me with an idea, like recently, that there's this Kickstarter, Dates. It's Dates anthology of queer historical fiction, and I really wanted to do that. So I submitted to them after asking my boss Ralph if I could, and Ralph was down with it. So while I am exclusive to Zenescope right now, they've been kind enough to kind of let me do things that I want to do that don't necessarily fit in with what they have on their schedule. So yeah.
That is awesome. So what comics are you working on right now, exactly?
Monthly, I have three ongoings going on. I have Robin Hood, which is a modern day take on Robin Hood. She's a badass character who lives in New York City and fights crime and supernatural things there. There's Grim Fairy Tales, which is about sort of like Supernatural meets Harry Potter. It's a magic school for supernatural beings, and that started with it's a long running series. If you go in the shop, it's currently at issue 115, and I took over with issue 101, and we kind of like revamped it from the start. And with issue 101, I'm gonna stay on that book until 125, and then I'm also doing Charmed season 10 monthly. It's the official continuation of Charmed, the TV show. And yeah, those are my three main books. But I also have a few miniseries. Like in August, Van Helsing vs. Dracula came out, and that's the Van Helsing character is featured in Robin Hood, sometimes Grim Fairy Tales. She's a mainstay in the Zenescope universe. So figured she had her series last year, and we wanted to do a bigger book. So we decided to pit her against her arch nemesis Dracula. So that one's going to be publishing from August through December, and then come January, I have some new books to talk about.
Ooh, very excited for that. Now, talking about Robin Hood, so that actually started out as a mini series. Actually had many mini series. So what was the process of creating that as an ongoing now?
Well, we did the first miniseries, and I didn't really know if it was going to get picked up, and I sort of changed the way I planned to end it once I realized that it was a success. It sold very well for Zenescope. And Ralph, I know, actually wanted to change it, and we had announced it as a miniseries, and Ralph wanted to go ahead after the sales of number one and after the reaction to number one and change it into an ongoing right then. But Joe wanted to stick more to the plan, which is just to do a few miniseries and see how it flies. So we did the Origin miniseries, then Wanted, then Legend, and the fan base of Robin Hood got very strong, and Ralph and I started collaborating on ideas for what we would do with an ongoing, and I didn't want to do any more missed stories, and Ralph wanted to do a sort of a vigilante in New York City story, and then I put together the outline for what I thought would be a good take on Robin Hood, and the guys at Zenescope and I just sort of went back and forth on certain things like the villains of the series, and what role Marion was going to play, because I initially had her as a romantic interest for Robin, but after the trilogy, where Robin's leading guy was Will Scarlet, they wanted to get her role a bit more away from the romance angle and give Marion her own separate love interest, so she, as a supporting character, has her own kind of arc too. And yeah, it was kind of step by step, because once we get the first arc, I had a very specific idea for where I would take the book after that. But then every time we finished an arc, I had some new ideas, and then we would kind of go back on the first plan, because at first it was going to be a bunch of one-shots with no real overarching idea. But once I introduced the Cabal storyline, that sort of took over. Because first it was going to be one-shots, and then it was going to be 12 issues of all Cabal, and then we decided to sort of mix those two ideas together and have it more as a season, where, say, a season of Veronica Mars, where you have the overarching mystery, but each episode somewhat stands alone. So we wanted to do these one-shots and mini arcs that, while standalone, build into an overarching story.
Very cool. So what are your female characters like in Robin Hood? Because you guys have some really, really cool, strong female characters there.
Yeah. Robin, for me, it's sort of like Marion and Robin are both the leads, rather than Marion truly being a supporting character. And they're both, Robin is from New York. She's a modern girl, and her perception of the world is darker. She sees all the things that are wrong with the world. She sort of does this because of how bad things are. Whereas Marion, who comes from Mist is the Zenescope fairy tale world. The base mythology of the universe is that there's Earth, and then around it there are 4 realms. There's Oz, Neverland, Wonderland, and Mist. And Marion is a witch from Mist, where it's sort of a more medieval world. And she, as a lesbian, Marion was not able to come out there, not able to really express herself, or there would be repercussions. Whereas in New York, while things aren't where they should be, she sees a beauty that Robin doesn't see, because whereas Marion's comparing our world to Mist, which is centuries behind us, Robin still sees it as this world that needs to improve so much. So they're kind of they balance one another out. They're very, each of them sort of fills a role in the other's life that no one has played before. So they kind of go back and forth between being independent and codependent, and they spend a lot of the series trying to find out what their relationship is and who they are as people. Because the thing about Robin Hood too is that she has anger issues, and we started an arc in number 6 where Robin goes into therapy, and she's sort of trying to find out who she is in the context of now, because now she has a chance to be happy. She's still struggling with life, but in the trilogy she was holding a lot of grudges. But now it's she has her best friend, she has her cats, she has her purpose. So her question to herself is, why am I not happy? And she's trying to figure that out.
Yeah. And now Robin Hood's actually based on the actual Robin Hood. All of the Zenescope characters are based on fairy tale characters. So what is similar of your Robin Hood to the male Robin Hood, and what's different from the male Robin Hood?
In the trilogy, she was a lot more similar. We played with the whole robbing from the rich, giving to the poor thing. We played with the idea of the sheriff from Nottingham, and we took on these iconic characters and stories while also subverting them and playing with the gender roles. And after the trilogy, I felt kind of tired of just finding things about classic stories to reinvent. So honestly, in the ongoing, there is next to nothing in common between the original Robin Hood and the Robin Hood that I'm writing. She is very much figured that she kind of became her own character through the trilogy. So now we're just going in a completely different direction. It's a lot more of an urban fantasy than a action adventure story that Robin Hood the poems were.
Awesome. So you also work on the Charmed comic book, which is actually based on the television show Charmed. So what is it like to write a comic about, a television show? Like what's that process like?
Well, all right. I had seen Charmed before, of course. I grew up on the WB. I loved Buffy, Angel, Charmed. I watched Dawson's Creek and Roswell, all that stuff. So Charmed was actually the first thing I ever pitched to Zenescope. So they had the license, and I was like, oh, I can write Charmed. So I pitched some Charmed stories, and that got me the gig because then they were doing season 9, and that was a complete thing. Paul Ruditis was writing it, and he didn't want to write season 10 when that came out. He wanted to sort of pass the baton. So when he read my pitches, he thought they were good, thankfully. And I got the gig to write season 10 years before it actually came out. So I had a nice grace period to rewatch Charmed, to really study it, take notes, just rewatch it on Netflix over and over. So it was a lot more research than Robin Hood, where with Robin Hood, I was an English major, so I was big on the legends, the poems, and I was especially big into medieval literature. So I had a soft spot for Robin, so I had that basis, and then I just revisited the poems and picked and chose here and there references to making characters to pull from there and make my own. But with Charmed is a very specific body of work. I can't really reinvent things. I have to take what's already existing and sort of go off on that platform. So I had to really understand the characters and choices they would make that I would understand while still being surprising for the reader. So Charmed is a lot more of a balance because I am trying to build my own story while also continuing a story that someone else started. So it's a lot different. And every time I write an issue, I have to go back and watch an episode just to make sure the voices are fresh. Because there'll be new characters that I want to pull up, and I want to make sure that I'm not making any references or saying anything that negates a story that's already been told. Because the last thing I want to do is be proud of an issue, write it, submit it, publish it, and then I see a fan comment that I'm contradicting an obvious episode. So it's definitely a lot more research.
Awesome. Now also, Charmed is known for their strong female characters. So what is it like writing these iconic?
I think I froze up a little bit.
Oh, no problem. I can repeat the question. So the Charmed ones, these female characters are, one of the strongest female characters of television. So what is it like writing the Charmed ones and writing these strong female characters?
It's very interesting to me because again, there's a really strange balance to walk, because a big part of Charmed is, and really drama at all, is characters making poor choices, So I have essentially the 3 strongest, well now 4 because Prue's back, the 4 strongest witches in the world. And there has to be drama. There has to be a problem. So I'm having these 4 powerful women navigate their lives and sort of get into trouble in a way that makes sense, because when you're that powerful, what is really at risk? So I had to sort of approach it that way, because you're right, they're iconic, they're strong, they're powerful, they're almost unbeatable. So I had to address that in a way that keeps them human, that grounds them, and that is still respectful of where they've been, because I don't want to tell a story that makes them seem weaker or less than they have been in the show. But I did want to take it to a darker place because for a while, Charmed season 1, and then 2, 3, and 4 were super dark, and people sort of forgot that along the way because when season 5 came along, it started to get lighter. They started doing the fairy tale things, and the way the Charmed ended, it became very happy ending, family oriented, and I wanted to strike a balance between the darker side of Charmed, where you have Phoebe making some kind of understandable but questionable choices in her relationship with Cole, and Prue being unable to express her love for her family. I wanted to get back to that where the core is family, but it's not all happy-go-lucky. It's not all good choices. It's about good people making choices that make us question them and make other people around them question them.
Cool. So we're going to move on to Grim Fairy Tales now. So Grim Fairy Tales is a really running indie title, which is not really known to get over 100 issues for an indie title. So what is it like writing for a book that has lasted so long?
I mean, it's really cool to actually type in Grim Fairy Tales. Now I'm writing issue 119, so it's cool to just type that out. Because before me, there have been many writers. Ralph and Joe created it, but so many guys wrote it. I think a guy, James Patrick, Raven Gregory, Dan Wickline, Mark L. Miller, and Shane McKenzie. All these great writers came before me. And what's interesting, though, is that each person had their own take on what it was. For a while, for the first maybe 30, 40 issues, it was Grim Fairy Tales. It was dark versions of fairy tales, and they were strung together by a very subtle ongoing plot. And then around issue 50, that plot took over, and it became a fantasy book. And then around issue 75, it was grounded. They went to Earth because it was a mist for a while. It became a jail story. And then we had our Unleashed crossover, which I wrote. I wrote a few Grim Fairy Tales issues around the 85, 86, 87, 88. And that became more of a horror book. So it's been so many different things. So part of what I'm doing with my run is to make sure that it's taking it in a new direction and just keeping it consistent, because I want it to be, for a while, it had been sort of a launching point for other books. During the 90s, we had a bunch of one-shots that developed things that would come into play for the Age of Darkness crossover. And I wanted to get away from that and have readers be able to come to Grim Fairy Tales monthly and get a full story. They read issue 101, story begins. Issue 102, the arc ends, but the story continues. So I wanted to approach it the same way that I'm doing Robin Hood, and give a brand new cast. Brand new cast, brand new story, brand new setting. So the goal was to make it the most accessible book in the Zenescope Grim Fairy Tales universe, because it's the centerpiece. All books spin out of that. So I wanted to finally give it its own long-running, long-form story.
Awesome. So, let's move on to Zenescope itself. Now, Zenescope is kind of known for the sexy covers, but also I think something that I've realized reading Zenescope for a couple of years now, it also has a lot of strong female characters. So what's your point of view of that, of having like kind of the sexy covers, but also having these strong female characters and letting people know that Zenescope is really about strong female characters?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's been a struggle for me because it's very hard to convince someone like me, because I'm a feminist. I don't know if I'd be convinced that there are strong female characters beyond the cover. I don't know. So it's hard to convince people like me and women, because I can't imagine the idea of that there being books like Miss Marvel now, Spider-Gwen, and then someone sees a Zenescope book, they're going to assume, based on the cover, that the women are not well written. That's been the assumption that I've seen a lot on Twitter, especially, and I've been added a lot on Twitter about that, um, and about how I reconcile my beliefs with that. And the answer is that the stories aren't the covers. You know, the covers are their own thing. Zenescope has been honest about that. It's a marketing tool. You know, the covers are what they are. There are collectors for those, but now there have been changes that have made the idea of what people see as a Zenescope cover, a Zenescope cover, is more of an exclusive cover. You know, there'll be more at New York Comic Con, whereas I've seen a shift in the regular covers, especially the B covers, the A covers. The C covers are still a bit pinup-y, but I've seen a positive shift where they're beginning to move with the industry to see that this isn't the only way to sell the books. You know, because a very smart thing that I think it was Ralph who told me this, that because I brought concerns to him before about certain covers. I always, if I have a moral issue, they're very open to hear me out. And Ralph has said before too, though, that a book doesn't get to issue 115 because of covers. You know, that just doesn't happen. So I know that there is a base audience out there who knows what we're doing, who reads the books for the books. But beyond that, all I can say is that I do come to people and say that if they're online tweeting at me about a certain cover, I'll be like, hey, I'll send you the issue for free. You know, just read it, give it a chance, and if your perception is right, then I'm totally wrong, and I'm sorry. But I've gotten some new readers, especially on Robinhood, because Robinhood is the book that most reflects what I'm trying to make a statement about. And do the covers complicate that? Yes. But have people seen beyond that? For sure. Is it their responsibility to? No. I mean, if someone doesn't want to give the book a chance, I understand. That's fine. We're not going to please everybody. I'm not going to please everybody. But I think that for those willing to see, there's been positive changes made. And as far as the things that haven't changed, the interiors are not what folks think they are. You know, the story itself, the interior art itself, is by and large, especially on the books that I've seen come out of Zenescope in the past 2-3 years, are very, very different and are much in line with what Marvel or DC is doing now. So yeah, that's my long and rambling answer to that. I've been asked that a bunch about the covers, so I always want to just be honest about it, because it's something obvious. You know, it's the thing people see when they see the books.
Yeah.
Which it's a little bit sad for me, but it's also something that I've sort of learned how to approach, I think, hopefully. So yeah, it kind of is what it is, you know.
Yeah, don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
Seriously. Yeah. So how do you feel about female heroes portrayed today? What's Marvel, DC, indie books? How do you feel like they are portrayed, or they portrayed well in your opinion?
I mean, I think that there's so much room for improvement, but the industry is moving toward a great direction. It's moving in a great direction, that is. Like I said before, books like Miss Marvel, Spider-Gwen, all these indie books from publishers like Boom. If you look at the books that are coming out now, there's, I think, a pretty noticeable difference from what especially Marvel and DC were doing a few years ago. I think that there's been a move to get women not only portrayed well in the actual books, but also on the creative teams. You know, it's crazy how white male driven the industry is, and it was so pervasive, and it is so pervasive that it wasn't even a conversation. There was very limited conversation about it in the mainstream. You know, the indie comics, there's people have never been silent, but I think that Twitter, I think that certain creators like Gail Simone rising to prominence has really helped shape the way the industry is going and has moved that conversation from the sidelines more to the mainstream. Because now I think that there's an active push to get people of color on the creative teams. When a writer is assigned to a certain title, sometimes there are questions asked. There are there's a little bit more backlash in certain situations, and I think that the industry, and when I say industry, I don't even mean like the upper guys. I'm talking about the people who read the comics, who buy the comics, the shops. People are questioning things. People are calling out strange behavior, as was posted sometime earlier this week, and some rumors last month. Which, yeah, I think it's all moving the industry toward what is hopefully a safer place. Because there's been harassment called out. There's been stories that had normally been just whispers at cons, just like quote unquote rumors, are now being literally called out and addressed. And that's something new. And I think that means the industry is headed toward a better place. And I think that there's always going to be changes that have to be made. I think that there's always going to be work to be done. But yeah, I think that all the conversations going on now are helping shape the direction in which we're all moving,
So my last question for you is, how does this modern, I guess, comic book industry affect your writing, especially writing of female characters?
It has me questioning things more, and I posted about this a while ago, that there was something done in the first issue of Robin Hood. It was in the outline I was given, and I fought it a little bit, but then was told that this needs to happen because of so-and-so, and I gave up. I was like, all right, I understand. I think that now I would fight it a lot harder, and now I make a lot more of an effort to make my voice made, because the thing about being a young writer and a new writer, new to being paid, is this deep-seated insecurity. Because I remember the first time I got a gig, my thought was, all right, I don't know when they're going to send the check. I don't know what my terms are, but if I ask, they'll be offended and they won't pay me. That's crazy. That's a crazy idea. You don't clock in at Starbucks. If your check doesn't show up, you're going to ask where the check is. If you do the work, you should be able to ask that. But there's this fear that that's the wrong thing to do in the creative field. And I think back then I feared the idea of challenging something I didn't agree with, and I just embraced it. And that wouldn't happen now. I don't know if it's because of the movement of the industry, or if it's just because of me being older, me having more experience. But I mean, now I wouldn't even harshly challenge a thing on one of my own books back then, whereas now I do that almost weekly on other books. that like if I see a lettered proof of a book I haven't seen before, and like recently there was the writer didn't mean it, but there was a line that I thought was super sexist, so I called it out. I was like, hey, this might not be what you want to say here, so yeah. I don't know why. I haven't really tracked the changes in my perception or why, but I feel like I'm more me now, especially in my work. I'm more me, because I went from doing my own screenplays, my own plays in New York City theater, to 100% full-timing it on someone else's characters. I came into Zenescope after having written for Angel, Joss Whedon's characters. At Zenescope's characters, these characters would exist with or without me. So I thought, who am I to say that this shouldn't happen? But the answer is I'm the writer. If I don't believe something, I shouldn't write it. Period. And I think I've learned that since then. But yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for, helping me out with this. Is there anything that you'd like to plug that's coming up for you that you'd just like to talk about?
I'd say just stay tuned to my Tumblr. I have my New York Comic Con signing schedule being posted there. The dates Kickstarter is up now. It's already been funded, but there are stretch goals, really cool things that you can get. I think that if you just contribute $25, you get the full anthology, which is a pretty great deal. And yeah, besides that, I have Robin Hood, Grimm, and Charm monthly. So I'm in the comic shops out there. And I'm on Twitter and Tumblr at PatShand. That's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you for, again, taking your time to do this. And this was Comic Uno. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview, and we will see you guys later.